Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. As you probably already know, you joined this webinar. The title here is From Lead to Customer, Mastering Follow-ups Through Calls and Emails, just so you know you're in the right place. And if you're not in the right place, then I don't know how you got here. So thank you, everyone, for joining today. We're really excited to welcome our panel for discussion, Darcy, who is from JustCall. She's the Director of Technology and Partnerships, and all-in-one business communication platform to connect with prospects and customers. That is JustCall. She has over 20 years of experience in telecommunications, and she's passionate about helping businesses to improve their communication systems. Then we also have Philippi, who is the Product Leader of Success and Sales at Selzy. He's in marketing and sales, and he's been in that area for over 10 years. So he has a lot of experience, and he's passionate about technology and startups. And he's also involved in incubating and mentoring entrepreneurs. So welcome to Philippi and Darcy. And then last but not least is Gosha, who is the co-founder of OnePageCRM, an action-oriented CRM used by companies in over 80 countries to grow their business. With over 15 years of entrepreneurial experience, she has a deep understanding of building relationships and sales. So those are our three panelists today. And a quick overview of our agenda, as you may already know, prospecting is going to be our first topic on how you can maximize your sales. Our second topic, nurturing, growth and engagement. And then third, customer retention. So driving those conversions and repeat business with action-focused selling. So that's it for our slides today. I'm going to stop sharing and go straight to the panel. Great. Now, our first question today, we're going to be talking about prospecting. So it's a big challenge that businesses face, with prospecting and finding your potential customers. A lot of people are talking about the importance of building your own prospecting lists. So we're going to ask Philippi today a question on prospecting. And Philippi, so imagine I'm running a small consulting business. How do I get people to sign up for my newsletter instead of the thousands of other newsletters that already exist?
Okay, Riley, thanks. You see, we need to think over and consider two main aspects. First of all, engagement, and the second one, customization, right? So you need to ask yourself, what does your newsletter offer that the others don't? So you need to understand which kind of content, which kind of information you are sharing with your client, with your prospects and leads as well. So you need to have some piece of valid advice. You need, for example, instead of giving general marketing tips or something like this, you could provide some specific information, industry related, right? In terms of customization, you need to think over always like how to get the correct message to the correct people, right? So you need to understand how you can segmentate them, how you can customize the message that's being sent. Also, as I mentioned previously, in terms of exclusivity, we need to think over how we can approach those possible leads. Understand, for example, how we can offer special content, special reports, give some sites, some hints in terms of exclusivity. And I think that we also need to mention regarding in terms of mobile optimization as well. So if you see, for example, most part of the people today, they have been consuming information and also newsletter over their mobile phone. So it's important for us to understand that the message, the design of it, it needs to respect and also follow some instruction regarding the mobile as well. You see, for example, in Selzy, we do have our editor that provides us with the tools and also some features that assist us to create those such designs and also to help us to build up this message connecting our possible leads as well.
Great. Yes. And email is one of the most powerful tools out there for prospecting. So and as we know, multiple touch points are a really important aspect of our business. So there's a stat out there, I think it says about 8 different touch points to get an initial meeting with the prospect. So these touch points include email. They can be many things, social media, blog posts, calls, that sort of thing. So email and calling is very important. So moving over to our next question for today, which is for Darcy. Cold calling has been a very popular topic in sales for a long time. How do you make cold calls as effective as possible?
Well, I think you have to really start by approaching cold calls by being human. You've got to make that call and create the rapport right from the beginning. they say that there's a statistic out there that I love. It says 93% of potential success from cold calls all has to attribute to the tone of your voice. So when you're making that call, it's important that you are speaking and talking as a genuine person that's trying to call and help somebody out, right? So to do that, we say be human. But the second thing is also know who you're calling. You've got to plan for your cold calling, and you've got to do a lot of research. So whether it's you're calling a specific industry, or maybe you're calling a specific title within an industry, whether it's a VP of sales or a director or a CTO, a business owner, you've got to do your research and understand what are their pain points, what's going on in their industry, what are the challenges facing a business owner today, say that works in the solar industry. What are their challenges? And then be relatable when you're making that phone call. I think that's really important, and we say like insightful questions. You don't want to just pitch. This should not be a product dump. That's what I've been telling my sales reps for years. You're not there to do a product dump. You're there to uncover what are the pain points, what are people's challenges. So you've got to ask insightful questions to understand that. And it may be something that sounds something like, say it's a solar company. Mr. Johnson, I understand that, in the solar business that you're in today, I have a bunch of customers that have explained to me that you put so much time, effort, and money and marketing into your lead sources that to be able to get those leads, it's critical to respond as fast as possible, right? So time is of the essence. How are you responding to the leads that are coming in currently? How is that a challenge for you today? How are you focused on fixing that issue?
Yeah.
And talking to them about it. So you really want to open them up. You don't want to just say, hey, we can make leads, respond immediately with 5 different ways. You want to actually understand how they're dealing with it. Some other things too are timing of your calls and to time strategically, right? So they say that first thing in the morning is probably not the best time to hit up a business owner or someone in leadership because they're getting slammed with all their voicemails and checking their emails. So mid-morning and mid-afternoon, they statistically say is the best time to call. So taking that into consideration. And then the other thing is being persistent. It's going to take anywhere. I mean, I've seen out there 5 to 7, I've seen 6 to 8, but let's just say 7 calls right now, touch points. It could be a call. It may not just be a call. It could be a call, an email, a LinkedIn message. There's so many ways of contacting our customers today, even a text. And the idea behind that is that we want to stay in there on top of mind for them because they may not want to respond to you when they first get your email or when they first get your call. But all of a sudden they're at a leadership meeting and they find out that, hey, you know what? We're wasting money on leads and we're not responding in time. We have a problem. And then they'll remember that conversation. So about 7 times on an average.
Yeah, those touch points are really important and making that genuine connection with prospects as well. So imagine I followed up, all the tips from Philippi and all the tips from Darcy here. I have an engaged email list. I have engaged prospects. I know how to nail my cold calls. But sometimes you need something else to kind of keep your sales growing. So moving over to Gosha now, what would I be missing if, that I'm still not seeing the consistency or the numbers that I want to see?
Yeah, well, I'd say if you already build an engaged audience and you have a subscribers list that engage with your content, you're doing a really good job. So you might not have to be in this webinar, but I think a lot of businesses, they actually struggle with this. It's not easy. It's not as easy to do as we just say, or just build an engaging subscribers list. The more common scenario is sometimes we kind of fall for a trap or vanity databases. So what I'm talking about, we might have 1,000 of subscribers in our list, in our audience, and we more focusing on getting those subscribers in rather than focusing on what we should be doing with them. So you kind of really have to start looking at your list, subscribers list, and start segmenting and separate them. The high quality leads from the low quality ones that they're maybe for the time being not engaging, maybe just ignoring you, and they need to kind of invest into developing your relationship with them. So The thing that we say, what's the next step in order to develop other relationships, is just to create a plan. It's the plan that involves different channels. We mentioned emails and calls, but again, other touch points as well, like, maybe commenting on social media or sending a text. Everything kind of has its place and the time. So what is the sequence that will work for your business? Everybody's business is completely different. So you might need to spend some time on experimenting to finding the best sequence of communication. Maybe at the beginning, maybe some businesses work better with cold calls, and they find that they find, that the conversion from the cold calls is more effective than the email. But for some other ones, emails would be the first channel, trying to warm up your new prospects and just describe what you can do for them and how you can help them. So there's a lot of time that should be invested in finding out the best sequence, and your messaging as well. So what is your message that you want to present first? Maybe some of your audience just only were added recently to your list. They might even know what are exactly your services, what you're all about. So you need to educate them. You need to send them some educational emails, explain first how you can support them, and then only then just maybe double down on more offers and more kind of offer that will speed up their conversion process. But the whole idea of creating that process, it should be that you basically stay on top of their top of their mind with your prospects. Okay, so it requires a regular contact with them. So basically, they don't forget about you. So just build a sequence of your communication messages, and then keep consistently delivering it until you actually find that they're starting engaging with you.
Yeah, thanks, Gosha. Consistency is really important, and we want to make sure that when we're prospecting through those channels that those are some great points. I should be taking notes here for sure as well. I hope everyone's enjoying the great points we have so far. So we're going to stay on this topic for a couple more minutes. We're going to move into a joint discussion. I'm wondering, how can businesses align these two channels? So Philippi, why don't we start with you? Aligning sales and marketing in prospecting specifically. So we're going to hear from Philippi first.
Perfect, Ellie. So basically, first thing that we need to think over, that we need to have on our minds, it is that sales and marketing, they need to speak the same language, right? So we need to be on top of everything at the same time. We need to have straight and effective communication, right? One of the ideas and one of the main points that we can think over in this situation, this case, is of course like creating goals, joint goals and KPIs for the teams on the marketing and also the sales teams. So we can set, for example, same or alike conversion rates, leads quality, establish revenue targets as well. So we need to make sure that we have the same goals here. At the same time, it's also important to have, as I mentioned at the beginning, this straight and very regular communication between the teams, right? So, for example, having weekly engagements, weekly meetings between the teams, so we can understand, for example, how has been the results of one, and we can match and also compare the results of the other. And at the same time, connecting both things, I feel that it is important to have at the same time the feedback sessions, right? So we need to understand, for example, how are the leads coming from the marketing team? How the sales team is handling them? What are the feedbacks? What are the information? What is the data that was gathered from the sales department that can be used by the marketing team once again? So in this case, we have this cycle that is important for us to understand how we can make both departments work in synergy.
Yeah, and I find a lot of times sales and marketing are operating in those silos, which, the communication, and I like your points on having weekly or monthly meetings between sales and marketing, just to get that alignment happening. It really does help drive results. So Darcy or Gosha, did you want to jump in?
I really think that, what Felipe said was right on target, right? You've got to have the clear definitions of what are the leads, what are the stages, what are the KPIs. So that's number one. The second thing is you've got to really, I believe this wholeheartedly, you've got to utilize your CRM. You've got to be able to have the data available to you and ensure that marketing and sales are looking at the same data and the same reports. So I think that that's very critical as well. And then also, like he also said, you've got to share that customer insights and the feedback for especially what is the quality of the leads that we received? How well were they received? So, I mean, those are the main points I would probably make and agree with.
Yes, I agree with that. So let's continue on. Our second section here is nurturing. So constantly being on the top of mind of our prospects, we start to build a connection with them. So it's really important. We start to nurture that relationship, and that brings us to our second topic, which is lead nurturing. So again, we're going to start with Philippi. Emails are still considered to be one of the best tools for nurturing. You're able to set up automations, you're able to do a lot of different things with email and customize certain aspects. But what are the top mistakes you see businesses make when nurturing their leads through email?
Sure, Riley. So basically, we know that there is no silver bullet for every case, right? So we need to understand that whenever we're talking about business, mostly for startups, it is the attempting and success or you try again, right? So what exists is this basically the strategy of learning. So you need to understand, you need to test it, you need to learn, you need to use your understanding once again so you can create this knowledge cycle, this experiencing cycle, right? But of course, there is this, would say, no actions that we need to be paying attention to. So first thing, overloading your leads with the sales message. So are you sure that they are right on the spot, right on the moment of receiving such message? So you need to ask yourself. Other things like we're talking about nurturing our leads. So we need to segment them. We need to understand on which point they are on the future. And at the same time, we need to understand what they're looking for in terms of message, in terms of information. So we need to think this over strategically. We need to put down all the figures, all the information that we need to share with those possible leads. And at the same time, we cannot neglect the segmentation, right? We need to understand what is the best information, the best message to send to the right lead. So this is the importance as well of qualification of those leads. At the same time, I would say that one of the biggest challenges, the biggest problems that we have whenever nurturing leads, it is related to the timing as well and the frequency of the message that we send. So take over the email message, the newsletter messaging as an example. So whenever we are communicating with the leads, it's important to understand what is going to be like the best possible cycle of communication with those leads on each stage of their nurturing as well. And of course, like to think over how to avoid such mistakes, such problems, I could think over in creating some scenarios to establish the segmentation, which is very, very important. And at the same time, understand, for example, what is your lead experience and what is the flow of your lead, right? So taking this in concern, you can build up your system.
Yeah, and segmentation definitely is important. Maybe it's easier to do that in email. I'm not sure if there's a way to segment with calls, but there definitely is a way to have a sequence of calls. So we're going to move over to Darcy and ask a question about how we can create a sequence of calls to nurture prospects and lead us towards a conversion. So there might be some similarities with email or not. So we'll explore that now.
Right. Well, I think that there's a lot of way to nurture those calls and or to nurture those prospects. And a couple of those ways, is the follow-up call. Some people call it the check-in call. I think that the most important thing about a follow-up call or a check-in call is that you're actually calling with specific information, not, hey, how's it going? What did you think of our call last week? I mean, you probably should have done that in the wrap-up of the last call, right? So I think it's important to, again, utilize your tools. If you have transcriptions of your call that you made the first time of your cold call that you can go back and look at and remind yourself of what the conversation was and where you left off. I think that's important rather, to check back in of what you left off, follow up with any outstanding questions that you had from your initial call, and then really reinforce the value of your solution during that checkup or follow-up call. And the other part of that too is being consultative. So when you're consultative in your call, then you are partnering with them and you are trying to find a solution with them. So if you're calling them back and nurturing them, call with some information. Hey, you were saying that you wanted to find out from our last call that you were looking at what your current conversion rate is today for your cold calling. Did you in fact get those figures? Did you know I looked up for your industry and what the standard is right now is blank percent? Does that sound like that's on target with the percentages that you're getting? And look to them as a source of information, and look to them as they're partnering with you, like you're their source too. You're working together to solve their problems. So I think that's really important. And then also there's also the demo or the walkthrough calls as well, or follow-up. So that's another big point of nurturing. You know, you've done the cold call, you've set up the appointment, you're following up, and now it's time to do the demo. And what do they say? A picture's paint 1,000 words. So it's kind of nice if they can see and experience your actual demo. And a lot of times I like to do a demo where they have to drive, where they're actually logging in, driving, because that pulls them into it and they get the experience themselves. So I think that's really important as well. And then finally, you know, really personalize your approach. It's not one fit all for nurturing calls. You've got to build on the relationship.
Yes, yeah, and building that over time takes time, and you can do that both through calls and emails. So we're spotting a little bit of a trend here. We're talking about emails and then calls, which both are very important. So what is the link between the two in lead nurturing? So there is a link. It is important. So we're going to move on to Gosha. What is the essence of action-focused selling? So this kind of takes into consideration these emails and these calls.
Absolutely. And without taking action, without sending emails or making that phone call, you're not going to progress in your relationship and you're making your sale, and you might not survive as a business. So it's very, very important that you start taking action. And I know a lot of people from, you know, small businesses, they might struggle with this. There's a big factor is the procrastination. There's always some excuses. Oh, I need to prioritize something else. I rather update my maybe contact information in my CRM rather than actually proactively just reach out to someone. And it's better to, you know, make that call and just find out that, okay, maybe my services are not the best fit, and then move on to someone else, rather than just keeping a profile of your potential customer in your CRM, still hoping they might still buy from you. But you might never find out if you don't send that email and you don't give them opportunity to say no. So even if you might not get the result that you want, even if you might not get a yes, it's still better to make that call and find out sooner than later. And then that means you can prioritize some other leads in your funnel. Okay, so this is a super important stage, nurturing. Okay, this is a stage where you develop your relationship, you deepen, you have opportunity to develop trust between buyer and seller, right? And when we talk about action, there is not one thing, not two things to do, but multiple things. It could be upwards of 20 or more. It depends on your sales process. And it doesn't always go as planned. Okay, so yes, it's great that we can make that call. We actually even got through to a right person. And maybe the next action after that call is just to send some more information. Maybe they have to respond to us, but they might just get busy and you'll never get that follow-up call. You never get that follow-up email. So it's super important that you are proactive and that you stay on top of what you need to do next. So we actually have a cycle kind of methodology that supports that process of constant follow-up and supporting you, or how you're progressing through the cycle of actions. So in OnePageCRM, we have next action, which is basically a task that you assign to your contact, which converts it just from the contact, a profile in your CRM into actionable assets. Okay. So you have that action, and that really focuses in on what you have to do. And once you send email or make that call, okay, there's another action for me right after that. So instead of moving on to a next person in your CRM, let's say, or I need to send another email, just pause for 5 seconds. You just, after sending a quote or making a phone call, okay, I need to, in 2 days' time, I need to follow up. Okay, if I don't get a response from, let's say, John, I need to make sure that I follow up and stay on top of that relationship, because that's the only way of not only progressing towards increasing your chances to close the sale, but also maintain the momentum of relationship. You're just not going to let that relationship go stale, and you're not letting yourself to maybe just leave that prospect unattended, and that they lose interest and they move on somewhere else. And what I'm talking about is really, really simple when you have just maybe limited number of clients, but things get really complicated when you have a lot of relationships open. They're all in different stages, and you need to be really smart how you're following up with every single person, so they actually feel well looked after. They know that they can trust you. And this is another kind of factor that will work in your favor when they'll be making decision, okay, who am I going to go with? Who's going to get my business?
Yeah, action-focused selling. I really like that. And what I'm also hearing, lead nurturing is a long-term strategy. So that's really interesting. So now we're going to move into the AI, the discussion part, which is going to be on AI. Has anyone here heard of AI? Of course you have. So taking into account how fast-paced current business environment is and the advancement of AI, what role can AI play in lead nurturing? How could it help you, but also maybe how could it hinder you? So we're just going to jump into a joint discussion here, and maybe we'll start with Philippi on this one.
Perfect, Riley. So basically, I believe that everyone has heard about AI. Of course, who doesn't use on a daily basis ChatGPT? But this is something very important that we need to understand, and this is what I would like to bring to the discussion today, is that we need to use it carefully, right? So we need to use it thinking over, being critical with the kind of information they are providing us with. You need to understand that whenever we are talking about marketing, communication, and of course nurturing a lead, it's important to have the human approach. The artificial intelligence is going to help you to, for example, analyze context, to bring up, to help you assess and understand, for example, a huge amount of data that you have been gathering, and of course, to set up your strategies as well. But they're not thinking over for you. So you need to be there as with your experience, with your feelings as well. You need to understand that the human presence is needed, even though we know that some ChatGPT or other artificial intelligence are smarter than some people. We know that we need to be there. We need to understand that this is a tool. This is part of the knowledge. This is part of the experience that we need to provide. But we need to assess it. We need to be understanding what they're providing us with and criticize this.
Yeah, thanks, Philippi. That's really insightful. Gosha, let's jump over to you and see what else you have to add.
Yeah, and I can add to it as well. Of course, I think everybody is probably at some sort of fashion using AI, right, at their daily work, and it's fantastic. And I think I'm not sure what your experience, but I feel like AI can help you maybe speed up your processes by 50%, and give you kind of maybe a nice setup at the beginning, but you still need to look over it, and you still need to finalize it, and still need to maybe personalize it, because AI doesn't always get it right. And on top of it, as Philippi said, AI, yes, in a lot of cases is very smart. They can provide a lot of insights to data, but actually it's up to us. And the end of the day, what we do with this data and how we use it to build a rapport and personal connection with our prospects, leads, and clients. Okay, so without that kind of human connection, I think it would be very hard to just sell on a cold kind of platform somehow. Like, people buy from people because they like them, because they value what they represent, and they genuinely connect with them, and they trust them. So AI is still not there. I don't know if it'll ever be there in order to assist. But again, at the same time, let's not ignore it. It's there to support us. And we know in the small business, like a lot of people would struggle with resources. Okay, so AI can do a lot of work on maybe 2 or 3 additional team members in your company. So why not take advantage of it? You can actually train AI, and you can create your own GPT, and they can serve as like a marketing manager in your company. You can feed them with specific information about your company, and then ask for the recommendations in return. And it might take some time until they get it right. AI will get it right eventually. And it's your decision to, okay, are you going to go ahead with it or not? But at the same time, it saves you time, it saves you money. You have some sort of a platform to bounce off your ideas off as well. So definitely take advantage of it, and the stage of nurturing as well.
Yeah, and great. And I'm just referencing Dennis in the chat. He's saying, you'll be able to identify that there's AI, and that personal connection is pretty important. So a lot of people can notice that. And Darcy, you have a quick comment. We're almost right on time. So if you want to add something quickly to the end of this discussion, go ahead.
I would love to add, because I think AI is such a hot button right now. And I believe that, especially in sales organizations, that AI can really be beneficial. You can automate AI in early stages of the engagement. Simple things like triggering follow-up calls based on actions. Like, you can set it up where if somebody opens your email, it can then set up a follow-up phone call for you that's going to connect a sales rep, or it can tell if somebody has had a web visit. One of my favorite things that JustCall has in their AI product line is that it can actually do a transcript of the call and rate the call for the salesperson.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's so cool because it actually can rate the sentiment of the call. It can actually talk about, was it a positive call? How many objections were there? How were those objections handled? Did you find solutions? And it can actually rate that call. And that brings you into sales training. Like, sales training is so important. And now you have a tool that can rate those calls so that the sales manager or the owner of the company can go in and see a call that scored really well or scored really low, and kind of be able to give those examples of what a good call sounds like, but also help coach someone in the areas that they could do better, because people buy from people. We need to have the human interaction. That's what people buy from, but we can use AI to help us do what we do best. So I think it's just really cool.
Great. Thank you so much, Darcy. That's the end of section 2, everyone. That's great. Are you still with me, everyone? Please, if you've added your questions into the chat, please just move them over and put them into the Q&A section, just because in the chat they might get missed. So make sure you're adding your questions in there. We're on to section 3, which is customer retention. So how does that help us get repeat business, help us cross-sell, help us upsell? So we have a question for Philippi. How do we create good email marketing, not just for lead gen, but for our customers?
Sure, Riley. So we need to understand all this process, right, as a cycle. Why is that? Because we had at the beginning the newsletter, we had this first communication, the nurturing of the leads. Then we moved up for a sales opportunity. We converted this lead, this opportunity, into a client itself. So from that moment on, basically, we offered them something, we promised them something. And after the sales moment, this product, this service is going to be provided to this user. And at this moment, they have higher expectations, because the sales process, usually we do promise, and of course, we show what the solution is capable of. But at the end of the sales process, if you don't pay enough attention, if you don't keep strategies, create strategies to keep them with you, this is going to become a problem, because the retention process needs to be thought over as a cycle. So we need to be including the client on conversations. We need to hear feedback, and at the same time, we need to understand, for example, how we can improve the service that are being provided. So in terms of retention, this is very challenging, I know, but it's important for everyone that has a business to understand how we can improve this, how we can be productive to our client, but at the same time, fulfill all the promise that was done, right? In those cases, of course, like whenever we talk about email marketing for the customers in this communication, we need to understand, for example, how to keep them engaged, how to keep them with us. And we have X examples with this. So we can create, for example, loyalty programs. We can celebrate milestones, for example, birthdays, anniversaries, or purchase anniversaries. So we can create stages and also, as I mentioned, like the milestones, so we can keep these communications going with our clients. We can keep this communication channel open with them. And at the same time, we can understand what they're struggling with, what they're looking for, what are the upselling opportunities that we may have with this communication opportunities, right?
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Very, very good insights there. Hope everyone was taking notes, but you will get the recording after this. So if you missed something, don't worry. We'll jump straight over to Darcy. We have a question for her. So about check-in calls and how those are important for customer retention and repeat business.
Absolutely. I think that the check-in calls are so important for retention and repeat business, because it is continuing on with the rapport that you built from the beginning. You know, you've closed the deal. Now, where do you go? You've got to follow up and continue to build that trust. You know, addressing issues early on. They may have more people that they just onboarded, and those people need training too. And they don't remember who did it or who to ask. So when you're checking in with them, those are important issues to bring up. You know, do you know how to use our product? Have there been any challenges with it? Also, it's a great way for you to improve on your offerings and your solutions by understanding how they're utilizing it and what they're running into. It's a great time to validate your ROI that you discussed during the sale, right? And talk about what the solution has done for them and celebrate those successes. So I think that's very important. And I also think that the cross-selling and upselling is very important as well. So talking to them about what are their next goals. So now they have, you know, improved their answer rates and increased their conversion rates. You know, how are they doing with their own retention? How can our products or someone else that we know, maybe another client for them, can help them with their next challenge? Because co-selling and building that community amongst all of us is so important, and you know, problem solving together. So I think that nurturing and following up and retention is critical. I also think it's great to constantly invite them to educational webinars like these. You know, keep reaching out to that customer to bring them along the ride with you. It's important.
Yeah, and trust. I know that's a thing that's coming up here. Trust and touch points. You build trust by creating those multiple touch points. So that's an important way to focus on that trust. And calls, email, you know, there's many ways to create touch points online, but that's kind of what marketing is all about. So Gosha, we're going to move over to you. The sales process doesn't actually stop after you sign the contract. So you win the deal, you're still selling, you know, you want to retain those clients. How would you kind of discuss this?
I know it's a great success when you're closing the deal and you win the sale. Mm-hmm. I think it's only a beginning. You know, it's a beginning, definitely beginning of a journey for your client, and you don't want to fail them at all. So it's super important that a proper handover happens between sales and customer support. Okay, so they can continue the conversation with the same style. They can deliver on the promises that have been agreed during the sales process. And you have to ensure that, you know, like it's much easier to work when you have all information in one place and easily accessible. So a good CRM will play a part in here as well. Like any notes that a salespeople might just taken before, any specific requirements, any specific circumstances, maybe a preference in terms of the communication style. Like how do they like to be looked after? What's important to them? And then the customer support can really build on that and make sure that they really deliver that positive impact here as well. So as I said, after winning a sale, some companies might actually not work as hard after the sale is sealed. And a lot of companies maybe would ask for deposit, just as a safety matter here. But then the customer might kind of feel like, okay, well, now that I've paid and they have me, maybe they don't have to work as hard. And if I have any query, I find out that they're not as responsive as I wished. And, another little factors might just happen along the way, and it actually becomes amplified. So all those are the things that are really important. And you can really avoid them if you communicate in advance, if you're really proactive about what's happening, keep them updated, make sure that they're always aware when they can expect maybe next communication, when the delivery of the service is happening, and you can really avoid and manage that relationship in a good way. And at the same time, I think it's super, super important, and I think Felipe also mentioned that, just to have that feedback loop as well. So a sale happen, you have that team of customer support to, it's your soldiers there on the ground. They are the people that will talk to a customer, and they can really connect with them and ask for the feedback. And not everybody is very willing to share negative feedback. So if you have opportunity to gather feedback that might not always be positive, that's opportunity to change really the attitude. You can fix it for them, and you can actually change them into loyal customers going forward as well, because you're right there, and you can actually swiftly offer maybe something for the next delivery, like a speedy maybe, or like a free delivery or something it might be, but impress them right there and then. So it's super important not to be complacent, but just keep working on this client. And if you do a good job, they will come back to you and, buy again.
Yeah, maintaining that consistent communication and after sale touch points. So maybe just as important as pre-sale touch points, which brings us to our last discussion period. How do we find the balance? I find this question really interesting, by the way. How do we find a balance between customer acquisition and customer retention? So like Gosha was just talking about, it's a really interesting question to me, and we're going to start off with Darcy on this one.
Yeah, I really weigh them equally. I think acquisition is so important, but it costs a lot of money to acquire a customer. So retaining them is critical to the long-term success of any business, right? And understanding if the retention numbers aren't good, understanding why. And again, that goes back to building trust and having open communication with your customer. So I think that effort has to go in equally to both. And I think that utilizing all the different types of tools that we have out there to reach out to our customers to make sure that we're retaining them is critical, from, setting up cadences within our systems, right? So that you can send out a really good email saying, hey, did you read about, this topic or this subject I just saw in the news, like touch bases, right? And again, it has to be relatable. It has to be specific to their industry or their actual challenges that they've shared with you. So I think that tracking that kind of information is really important. And there's tools out there that can do it. And then you could be doing an email, or you can do a phone call, or you can send out a newsletter that's talking about these subjects. So I think that they're both equally as critical to a long-term success of any organization.
Yeah, and Gosha, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with Darcy. You need to divide your effort between acquisition and retention. Sometimes it's maybe more important for businesses to double down on customer acquisition, because it might depend on their business model that, they may be providing one-off services. The repeat business is not as important for them. So it's very important that they keep their top of the funnel quite full. But same, like if the cost of customer acquisition cost is quite high, you can't really afford not retaining that customer for a long time. Therefore, you have to probably do everything that's in your power to make sure that they're happy with your service and they will stay engaged for a long time. And this is your priority above all. And then again, if you create a network of happy customers, and they don't worry, they will recommend you, they will make sure that they will spread the word about you. So it really kind of works towards filling the top of a funnel again, and it's kind of closing the cycle. So your effort will never be lost.
Great. Well, this was really interesting. Now we're done. We're going to jump into the question and answer period. So we're not quite done yet. But we have one question from our audience. Nick is asking, and I think this is a great question. What's the best way to welcome new inquiries with useful info, but not to overload them or frighten them away? So how do we not overload them with too much information, frighten them away, but still keep them engaged?
I would say that it's important to answer their actual question. You know, you don't want to overload them with information. So be specific to what areas they needed information on. But
Yeah, fair
go
enough.
ahead, Felipe.
Felipe, yeah.
Actually, I think that whenever we are engaging on an initial conversation with a possible lead, it's not that important that we show everything that we got for them, but first we need to understand what they want, right? So we need to address all the issues first. We need to address what is the current situation, what is the scenario that they have, and then we can start to fill in the gaps with the solutions that we have. So in such a case, I think that's way more productive than just like overload them with a lot of information that's not required by them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So second question here is somebody who runs a academy in Mexico. They're saying they teach people in how to DJ in 1 to 2 weeks. What we're trying to do is increase people showing up for calls. They book, but they don't show up to the call. I think we've had a lot of suggestions already of what we can do, but is there any suggestions of how we can make sure that we have these prospects showing up for our call?
Yeah, I think it's something that happens recently quite a lot. And I find, you know, like if you have your calendar open for, you know, maybe 2 weeks, a couple of weeks ahead, and people book in advance, they just forget about it, and the urgency of that their inquiry becomes less and less. So I think you have a greater chance of someone to showing up to a call if you can react quickly, you know, can they book the call with you today? Can you try to kind of open your calendar that your calendar is open maybe in an hour's time or tomorrow? That's probably the best chance for you to have a successful conversation. If it goes on a little bit like into the future, you have to rely on reminders and maybe possibility of letting them reschedule the call if they're not available to it. Like it would be just nice for them to commit to a call, just ask him again, are you available? And once somebody actually just checks, yes, I will be there, more likely you have a greater chance for them to be on that call rather than just ignoring a reminder that requires no action.
Yeah, great answer. So we have another Nick, N-I-C, Nick. When I've not heard back from a lead after a number of times, I send them a breakup email. It helps to close the loop and gives them an opportunity to respond. How do the panelists feel about these types of breakup emails and if we use them or not?
It depends. I would say if you go with an argument on your flow and then you have a specific information over the business and also the actions that need to be taken, maybe it's easier for you to understand each point you need to break up. So it actually depends. It's very specific, depends on each business.
Yeah, I don't use them myself. I tend to want to chase other ones who are more interested and focus on those, but I guess it does depend.
Sometimes people use the breakup email as a point, like, okay, breaking point, and say, okay, well, it's now or never, just make your decision if you feel that there's still a chance of someone to convert. But I think don't be sending a breakup email too soon. Like make sure that you have enough interactions, that you explored all the avenues before, that you did a good job. I've been talking to another colleague of mine, and they say they've been sending emails and reminders and commenting on social media everywhere with the potential client. And they were not really getting any responses. And they were actually quite surprised when after the 13th follow-up, they actually got a response which led to closing a deal. So never say never. And just put down the good work and don't give up. If you see any signs that they might be interested, but they're getting distracted, they're very busy, it doesn't mean that they're ignoring you because they're not interested. They're just very busy. So maybe keep going for another while.
Yeah, there's many types of touch points. Email is one of them. So maybe don't just focus on one type of touch point, think about maybe I can connect them on LinkedIn or other ways. Philippi?
Yes, just to mention as well, Riley, that we can also use the breakup emails as a strategy to make like the last effort, the last engagement effort, right? So we can have like this motivation to make them understand the exclusivity of this offer that we are making, all the effort that we are involving on this process. So you can also use this as a strategy as well in your process.
Yeah, fair enough. We have another question here from Karis. I think we need to do more on qualifying our leads and understanding where they are in the buying journey. Can you identify what questions help here throughout the buying journey? I think it's a big question.
I can kind of answer part of that. I think that that's part of the discovery call, really understanding once you agree that there is a need and a solution that you can offer, and there's agreement on that. I think that it is a fair source to say something such as, I know you've expressed how you feel that we can really help you, improve your, I keep going answer rates, but whatever. So improve your answer rates. And I know that's important to you. Do you have a timeline where you need to affect this type of change? And can you tell me what your buying process is so I can be in alignment with you and we can plan our next steps accordingly? I think just being honest and asking the questions is a lot of times quite refreshing to the person on the other part of the phone, right? So I think just hitting it straight up and improving our discovery type calls.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. One other question that's kind of coming up in different forms is opt-in, email opt-in, some GDPR related questions, and the difference between that and a personalized email. So if you know someone, that's different than if you're putting them on an email and blasting out, 1,000 emails at once. So does anyone have any thoughts on that? How do we approach this? As the last question.
We need to be careful whenever we talk about GDPR, right? Because all the information that we keep under the database, this needs to be agreed. So the leads has to be acceptable in terms of the information that they have shared with us. So what I would say is that you can set up your strategy using the GDPR at your end. Like, be careful whenever you're communicating with people. So make sure that you are allowed to address them correctly, and also you have their allowance, of course.
Yeah, and I guess the big point here is the difference between a mailing list and a personalized email. So OnePageCRM has a personalized email send function, and you're sending those to your contacts. It's not an email blast tool, so there's kind of a difference there. All right, that's the end. Thanks everyone for joining, and goodbye.